Good morning, friends. Good afternoon to those in Queensland. My name is Geetesh Agarwal. I'm the Commissioner for Trade and Investment Queensland for India. And I would like to thank you on behalf of TIQ for joining in to this very interesting series of engagements to understand the rapidly changing policies and impacts of those policies in India amongst the three recent policy changes, and I call them defining policy impacts. Education is extremely close as a sector and as a building bridge for India and Australia and India and Queensland. So we are very happy to bring this interesting engagement. I don't call it webinar, and I don't call it another episode of just information. I'm joined by my colleague Ramya Mohanakrishnan, who spearheads Study Queensland initiatives in my team in India. And of course, our two key presenters, Ms. Lakshmi Iyer and Ms. Delia. So once again, a warm welcome to all. After 34 years, the National Education Policy, called NEP in short, in India, has outlined a new roadmap to overhaul India's education system. This document promises to bring transformational change to the higher education. With 500 million youngsters, India is going to remain, I would say, the market to go to for higher education across the world. The National Education Policy has key highlights: access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability as the key pillars. And it is also aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Aiming to transform India into a knowledge superpower, it proposes to make school and college education more holistic, flexible, multidisciplinary, and suited to 21st century needs. This policy endorses an increase in public investment in education, much needed for a long time, by both the central government and all state governments, to reach at least 6% of gross domestic product and 20% of all public expenditure. Of the total budget in higher education, at least 2% will be earmarked for research and innovations. This policy intends to double the gross enrollment ratio for higher education from the current 26.3% to about 50% by 2030, as well as encourage higher education institutes to move towards a multidisciplinary approach. A series of reforms are being touted pertaining to overall regulatory structure of higher education, enabling the use of technology, upgrading curricula as per the latest skills and knowledge requirements, and of course, global collaborations, international engagements, right from early childhood to higher education. Australia has always been renowned and respected in India for excellent quality of education in Australia as well as Queensland. Queensland enjoys India as its second largest source of students, and many students are adding to the economy and industry and innovation in Queensland. In this current COVID world, as we aim to remain engaged as partners and collaborators between India and Australia, India and Queensland, the education sector will be one of the most important industry and sectors which will develop and deliver a heightened revenue source, transactional opportunity, and of course partnerships for days to come as the world starts coming back to a normal or a new normal. The format of this program would be Ms. Lakshmi and Ms. Delia taking you through the implications and opportunities for the Queensland international education and training sector in the next 30 to 35 minutes. And we'll follow that up for about 20 minutes with question and answers. If you have questions, please type it in the question and answer chat box. We will try to answer as many as possible. Let me now just briefly introduce Sannam S4 and Lakshmi. Sannam S4 has been one of the leading market entry companies in India, having consulted and supported more than 350 institutions. Ms. Lakshmi Iyer, who is the Executive Director and Head of Education for Sannam S4, she is been working in the sector for 18 years now and brings senior managerial experience to the table. Her passion for the sector is immense, and she's been an active observer and commentator about the industry. She's been working with Sannam since 2011. Prior to working with Sannam S4, she was associated with Study Overseas Global, a leading education consultancy in India. She served in the company for 9 years, having been part of the establishment team in Mumbai, relocating to Delhi to run the operations at headquarters. In her 17 months tenure as the head of UK operations, she's established new branches in Indore, Chandigarh, and managed 6 offices across the country. She is a DFID scholar with Masters in International Marketing from UK, and she began her career in international education working in the Student Support Office at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. She started young, I would say. An extensive background in counseling for multiple countries, over 9 years, and training and managing scores of counseling staff in her team have helped hone her skills in the sector, thus enabling her to support Sannam S4's education clients successfully. At Sannam S4, under her leadership, the education division now supports over 70 higher education clients from 8 countries. And in the last 6 years, she's been responsible for nurturing key relationships, which has enabled the division to expand its footprint to China and South Asia, apart from India, LATAM, and the UAE. She's a much sought after speaker at leading higher education conferences such as AIEA, AIEC, VCCIE, NAFSA, and NZIEC. She is an avid observer and commentator of the higher education space and runs the most respected personal LinkedIn, Twitter channels for news aggregation on higher education. A little bit about Ms. Delia Hennigan. She's the Director of Education for India for Sannam S4. She brings in 25 years of senior hands-on experience of higher education as an academic and specialist in international strategy and operations. Her experience includes 15 years as Dean and Director of International at a leading UK university, with responsibility for the development and delivery of the internationalization strategy for the university, including student recruitment and partnership development. The roles have involved establishing international operations, opening and managing offices in key markets, including India and China. Delia's experience includes strategic development and operational delivery in Indian subcontinent, China, Far East, Central Asia, Africa, Europe, Middle East, and Americas. Following this, Delia added to her international repertoire, spending time in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as Dean and founding principal of a Women's College of Excellence, part of the KSA government program to expand educational opportunities for young Saudi women. Pursuant to this, she took on the role of a Pro-Vice Chancellor at an American university in London in 2015 and delivered responsibilities including resource, process, and system reviews. She's a chartered marketeer and manager, and she sits in the advisory boards of leading higher education bodies. Wow, that is quite some introduction, and I'm sure the audience are looking forward to hearing more from you on how to understand these new policy and the impact it will have on Queensland. Over to you, Lakshmi, Delia.
Thank you, Gitesh, for that very kind introduction. Good afternoon, all of you who have tuned in from Queensland and elsewhere in Australia. And on behalf of Sannam S4 and Professor Delia Hennigan, I would like to very much thank Gitesh and the team for inviting us to help unpack the national education policy. So between Delia and I, we have got about 10, 12 slides that we will walk you through, leaving enough time for us to take some questions. Obviously, apart from the pandemic, this is the burning kind of educational issue in India at this point in time, with a lot of debates and discussions, and also a lot of optimism and eager kind of anticipation of how this is going to evolve in the next 15 to 20 years, which is the horizon that has been set out in the 62-page document, which for the first time, I would say that in the context of the education policy is a brief document, but brevity is not its only kind of quality. There are a lot of things that have been packed into this document, which if we manage to achieve, would make India's higher education and school education landscape quite forward-looking and fit for purpose for the centuries ahead of us. So without further ado, let me just dive into the presentation. So the presentation is going to cover the key highlights, the evolution of the NEP. Gitesh has set some context at the beginning. What are the changes expected in the school and the higher education landscape? and also the emphasis that has suddenly come about on the vocational education space, where Australia has always been a pioneer and has got a very thriving sector. What could be the potential opportunities that could emerge for Australian institutions? And finally, the question and answer session. So the key changes as a result of the NEP, and I think it's an important kind of point to note. So previously, the ministry that was in charge of education per se was called the Ministry of Human Resource Development. That has now been renamed as the Ministry of Education, putting education at the center of everything now that ministry is going to do. The emphasis on transnational education, which emerges very clearly throughout this document, which is, accepting that, a lot of India's thinking in the education space is now going to be based on collaborations that could happen between institutions. Along with Study in India, which was a program that was launched a few years ago, with a view to attracting students from all over the world to come and study in India, largely from India's near neighborhood and Africa and the Middle East. We have started hearing in the last 3 months, as the pandemic has continued to march on in the country, about stay in India. And the government acknowledges that to enable and also to attract students who choose to leave the country to stay in India, there should be forward-looking programs that are architected, which could be quite attractive and have a very high employability quotient. There is a 3-language formula, as India has got several, over 29 states and several union territories and so on. Language has always been a big issue. So the document talks about a 3-language issue, but also an emphasis on English. One of the key challenges that many of the schools run by the state governments are facing is that, even people from the lowest of the socioeconomic status don't want to send their children to some of these state-funded schools, primarily because they feel that the future of the children will not be secure if they don't get access to English language education. We feel that the entire change that we are going to see in the education landscape with respect to India, we will see being led by higher education. The document accepts that the biggest catalyst in terms of the higher education scenario and even school education is going to be technology. The 3 pillars for the reform of the education space would be around autonomy, giving more autonomy to the institutions, making them more adaptable and flexible so that they can take on the dynamic environment that we all currently find ourselves in as a result of the pandemic. Repositioning of the vocational education. This has been a big challenge in India. There has been, in the last 15 years, a lot of efforts made to incorporate vocational education in our higher education space. Now the government has come out as part of this document saying that vocational education will be embedded from class 6 at the school level. Teacher education has been emphasized throughout the warp and weft of this document, and setup of special education zones. So interestingly, in India, in the context of special education zones, I would like to make a comment. Usually we see that whenever countries have made special education zones, they have made those zones as ring-fenced areas where educational institutions can be set up without much regulatory challenges. Here, in the context of India, special education zones talk of the educationally disadvantaged areas of India, where they would want to attract more educational institutions to come in and set up. The evolution of the national education policy, as Gitesh mentioned in his opening remarks, this is the policy that we have had after 34 years. So obviously immediately after independence in 1947, a University Education Commission was set up in 1948. But since then, it has evolved over a period of time, and then pretty much kind of, came to a standstill by 1986. And then we have had a lot of committees that have sat on this. And one of the things that Prime Minister Modi, as soon as he came to power in his first tenure, did was to task the Subramaniam Committee to look at how we come up with a new national education policy that would be fit for the times that we live in and fit for purpose. That committee tried to submit a report, which did not go through. And then the Kasturi Rangan Committee was set up to look at some of the key recommendations made by TSR Subramaniam Committee, and then distill a document that could kind of enable us to move forward. And it is interesting that towards the end of July, the government of India made the announcement, and the document came into its existence in the public realm. Now, as I keep on saying, now is as good a time as any other to do this, primarily because we know that the whole wide world, education has been turned upside down as a result of the pandemic. So this is a good time for India to start making some of these structural changes that we need to do with respect to our education landscape. And as Gitesh mentioned, the founding goals and principles of the document and this NEP are based on access. No conversation in India can kind of take place in any realm of public policy without looking at the questions around access and equity, primarily because of the way our society is, and the number of people that are at the bottom of the pyramid with respect to their socioeconomic conditions. But the document also looks at quality and accountability, and the quality element has been resonating in our education landscape over the last few years, primarily because India has looked on with a lot of envy at China, at how Chinese institutions have climbed the rankings ladder and have acknowledged that Indian institutions have acknowledged that they have their work cut out and have a long haul ahead in terms of offering quality higher education more widely than it is presently. There are a lot of islands of excellence here in India. So the school education, I will just start off with the school education reforms. In India, we do have a culture of a coaching culture, firstly, and then primarily because you don't get the right kind of education within your schools to be able to crack some of the entrance examinations, which enable students to get into these so-called islands of excellence. And it is literally a passport to a better life. As a result of that, we have had a situation where, we have all gone through this. The examinations, the 10th standard and 12th standard are, quite literally determining of your entire future career paths. And that is what this document tries to break open. And it says that, there should be regular formative assessment. There should not be any hard separation between arts and sciences. And, this is, publicly India embracing a liberal arts kind of education system. Board examinations should be low stakes as a result of, the continuous assessment that we would want to put our children through. And vocational education should be embedded from class 6 with internships, so that you have a generation of skilled people rather than students who are emerging from our educational system as a result of rote learning and not really kind of having life skills. So The previous academic structure, as you can see, we have kind of incorporated into this slide, and the new pedagogical and curricular structure is going to be the 5+3+3+4 kind of structure, which would enable students to probably kind of, come out without this siloed kind of learning that we have all kind of had so far. The important thing to note also is that many of these recommendations in this document are to be implemented from end of 2020, and then we will start seeing, that is what at least it envisages, that we will start seeing some of these key changes coming through from 2021, and the horizon of the document is till 2040. So with respect to vocational education, and we all know that Australia has been very closely involved as an observer and also as a contributor to trying to help India figure out the vocational education landscape. And Delia would say, as a British national, that even the UK has been very heavily involved. So a lot of nations have kind of tried to get involved. But in India, vocational education has suffered from perception challenges. And we have really not been able to kind of integrate vocational education so far into our school and higher educational curriculum. We are hoping that with the statement of intent that has been made in this document, that vocational education will now be part of the school curriculum. This is hopefully going to change how we view vocational education, and could also potentially open up more opportunities for students who would probably want to kind of segue into a vocational career path rather than the usual career paths that we have seen students going into in terms of commerce and science and social sciences and so on. So there are, the document says that there should be apprenticeships and also internships as part of the vocational education, and has recommended constituting a national committee for the integration of vocational education into our curriculum. Only time will tell, but the statement of intent is that by 2025, at least 50% of our students should have exposure to vocational education. So in terms of the changes in the higher education architecture, we currently, our higher educational system has got many types of universities and institutions. The government, the document enables a new kind of consolidation, so that structurally it starts kind of looking a bit more cohesive. So it is talking of a progressive kind of movement of autonomous degree granting colleges to becoming universities, and the universities per se would be divided up into research intensive universities and teaching intensive universities. And this is actually a progressive kind of spectrum. So as you would perhaps know, we have over 1,000 universities at this point in time in India, and over 40,000 colleges. Out of these 40,000 colleges, about 8,000 are autonomous degree granting colleges. So they had at some point in time demonstrated that they are on their way to becoming higher levels of institutions, and have been given the power to award degrees. And these colleges will be nurtured to becoming universities over a period of time. So we will now see a further massification of our higher education space. India is already kind of massified sufficiently, but then with the number of students that are going to come into our higher education space, we probably need more institutions to be there, and also different models. At this point in time, our gross enrollment ratio is 26.3%, which is about 37 million learners that we have in the higher education space. And by 2035, there are ambitions to push this to 50%, which would mean that over 70 million learners would be there in the higher education space. The structure of our and length of our degree programs have always been, have generated a lot of heated debate amongst a lot of academicians here, who some of whom favor the 4-year degree programs. Some say 3 years are good enough. Having said that, this document now puts paid to all of that debate, and it encourages to have 4-year undergrad degrees with different entry and exit points allowed now for students. Otherwise, if you look at how most of us kind of have done our education, it's pretty linear. We do our school education, immediately get into college, finish that, and just come out without dropping a year. Gap years are all kind of unheard of in the Indian context. Now this document has said that these are all possibilities. Students could go into the workforce after the first year in their degree and so on. And the document clearly encourages 4-year multidisciplinary bachelor's program as the preferred option. And it could also, the 4-year program could also lead to a degree with research. So the final year being the time that the student spends in researching a particular topic, which could then kind of enable them to move into their postgraduate program, which again, we have had institutions from, say, for example, the UK offering 1-year masters, and India has always maintained that input is more important than output. Now this document actually changes that and says output is more important than input, which is a significant kind of move on our part to acknowledge that we no longer care about how many years people spend within institutions, but we care about what they emerge as having spent that time. So there could be 2-year master's program, but then if a student has done a 4-year undergrad degree, then they could end up just doing a 1-year master's program. And we have always had integrated masters. Now this opens up more opportunities for other kinds of programs. Usually we have seen for integrated masters in law and so on, but we will now see more and more of integrated masters being offered in other disciplines as well. And a long-standing MPhil program will be discontinued. And in terms of regulation, we have always had a lot of turf wars, lot of bodies that compete rather than collaborate, and kind of fiercely protect their realms of power and their ability to govern the areas of education that they are responsible for. The document now clearly states that India will set up a Higher Education Commission of India, which will then under that subsume UGC and AICTE, the University Grants Commission, and the Technical Education governing body AICTE. All of these will come under the Higher Education Commission of India, which will then kind of start looking at the 4 kind of key verticals. So the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, the Accreditation Council, the Grants Council, and the General Education Council, which will set the academic standards and so on. All of these 4 bodies will report into the Higher Education Commission of India. Having said that, legal education and medical education have still been left outside of the realm of the HECI. We will have to wait and watch how this is going to pan out. This is going to probably spark a lot of debate in the parliament, because we have always seen that anything to do with UGC and AICTE are highly emotive issues in the Indian context. Before I hand off to Delia, I also would like to draw your attention on the National Research Foundation, which this document clearly states that India needs to set this up along the lines of the National Science Foundation in the United States, and become the central body that will look at dissemination of funds. It will probably kind of integrate the funds that are currently dissipated over a lot of other organizations into one place. So it will coordinate with the funding agencies and work largely in the fields of science, engineering, to make sure that the funding goes to projects that are of relevance for India's future, and also look at some of the common challenges that we face as a humanity, and start funding those projects. There could be opportunities for bilateral and trilateral funding under this. We are still waiting for more notification on how this organization is going to look like, and how what kind of an evolutionary path has been set up for the NRF. Over to you, Delia.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from the west coast of Ireland, where I'm currently stranded because of COVID. It's lovely to join you, and great to be talking about this this very important policy for India. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes in higher education that and also some of the opportunities for Australian institutions, not just universities, because one of the fantastic things about this policy is that it's all-encompassing. It is not looking just at one sector and looking at that sort of in isolation. It is a complete, as Gitesh said, transformational approach to how education will be experienced for Indian young people for the future. So, and one of the key areas that the committee identified as being a potential for change and for driving change and ensuring that it moves as quickly as possible is internationalization, because obviously there is an acceptance that these things have been tackled in other countries, and there is much that can be contributed from other countries to this development area in India. There is also a recognition that to take India's place on the world stage in the 21st century, then internationalization can very much be an important part of developing the thinking across the population about what's going on outside the global position of India. So internationalization is very, very important from a whole range of different perspectives: soft diplomacy, the revenue generation, the attraction of top quality academics, and the sharing of best practice. So to enable this to happen, India will be promoted as a global study destination. And one of the key points that Lakshmi made at the beginning is that quality is a driver here. And we all know that student mobility, faculty mobility is very much driven by quality education. Nobody moves for a low quality education. So that's going to be something that is very much at the heart of what will happen. And to deliver that, there is much to be done, because there is a need to develop capacity and capability in this space. So very practical things will come out of this policy, such as all Indian higher education institutions who want to host foreign students will have an international students office. There will be much development around areas such as, how they can feel safe, comfortable, secure, and really benefit from this experience. And of course, many of us who have worked in universities and institutions know that it's not just, internationalization is not just getting on a plane and going to study somewhere else for a few months or a few years. Internationalization at home is very important. So not every student will be able to do that getting on a plane, but having international students in the classroom, around the campuses, will drive that global viewpoint for those that maybe don't have those opportunities. So very, very important that this is a two-way process, and it's not just Indian students going out, but that students from around the world will have the opportunity to come and experience the richness that is India. So that is very, very important. And again, mobility is not just about students. Research and teaching collaborations will be important. Faculties are very, very much at the heart of driving internationalization in an institution. And I mean true internationalization that is not just about mobility, but it is about curriculum, it is about the students and the faculty experience and joint research, etc. So it touches every aspect of an institution. And also that then seeps out into the institution's community. And we all know that universities, colleges, institutions drive local economic growth as well. And that is what India and this policy is looking to enable higher education to do across India. So high-performing Indian institutions will be encouraged to set up campuses abroad. This is about telling the world that India is about quality and that, that they can compete on the world stage. India already has campuses overseas, small numbers, and mostly from the private sector. And I think one of the first ones was in Sydney, SP Jain, of course, in Sydney. So there are campuses in Dubai, there are campuses in the US, there's campuses in the UK. So very much going to be something we see in the decades to come. This is one of the most talked about aspects of the policy, which is this. The press has focused on this top 100 universities in the world. We are very fortunate in that we've had the opportunity to speak to colleagues who have been very close to the committee, worked on this document, and they have shared with us that this is really a placeholder. And it is not really going to be that that's the only thing that happens. One of the key things about this policy is that, yes, there will be opportunities for international universities to set up in India, but it won't be, anyone and everyone. The doors will not be open to anybody who wants to do it. It will be about focusing on quality of delivery and contribution to the principles of this policy. So top 100 universities is there. It's a placeholder. It will be hotly debated. You've got issues around, is it the top 100? Should it be the top 200, the top 500, which ranking? And of course, we all also know that, quality is not just about ranking placement. It's about subject quality. So you can have all sorts of different ways you slice and dice that. So this will be very much part of the debate. And I'm sure we will see much development in this area. Other reforms that I want to touch on, and one particularly important one, particularly as we sit in the world that is now, COVID world, is the embrace and acceptance of open and distance learning and technology-driven learning. So part of one of the objectives of this policy is opportunity for education for all. And so we know that India will not be able to deliver education for all in bricks and mortar buildings, because that's simply not possible given the 70 million that is the objective in higher education alone. So distance learning, technology-driven learning, flexible learning are all going to be part of this package that comes about. And what's been one of the good things to come out of COVID, I'm sure there are not many, but this is one of them, is that acceleration of both the ability and the acceptance of distance learning and tech-driven learning. So open distance learning will be there, and this will give opportunities, and particularly in the vocational space, which, as Lakshmi said, has always been a challenge in India, because of the size, the underinvestment, and also the fact that culturally it is not seen as aspirational. So all of those things need to change. And this is a very key sector, and I know we'll have opportunities for institutions from Queensland to contribute. There will be an autonomous body set up, as I think you will have noticed on that slide, which will drive the change here, and Lakshmi mentioned that in her presentation too. So that will be a body that will drive reform and hopefully bring change. Now, opportunities, it says here, for Australian universities, but this is not just about universities. Universities are very, very important, of course, and in the higher education space, but it is about a whole range of institutions and organizations, vocational institutions and schools, because there are opportunities for schools to collaborate. This is a policy for the whole of education, introducing, for example, early years education for the first time extensively across India, a very, very important part. If you do not have children going through a properly structured education system, you can have the best higher education in the world. It will not achieve what this policy is. But in terms of, so when I talk about universities, I'm talking about a whole range of institutions. We've touched on the top 100 universities. I think that will change and develop and evolve, and you will see an acceptance and appreciation that there are lots and lots of different things that universities who are not in the top 100 can bring to the party. Of course, the top 100 will need to be there, and they will be there. Partnerships and TNE, and this is going to be the real big game changer. you know, we've all sat on the sidelines, certainly, you know, colleagues that I've worked with over the decades working in India, wanting to be able to do some of the partnership models that we're all familiar with in other countries that have successfully driven, you know, collaborations. These will now open up in India. So we will see, you know, lots of the models that we've been familiar with in China and other parts of the world. They won't be the same. They will need to be adapted for India. It is not a lift and shift, but the underpinning philosophies, the collaborations will now be possible. And some of the institutions are already doing work in that space, but it will expand dramatically. And it will need to, because these changes will not be able to be delivered without those partnerships, without that sharing from across the world. So we will see twinning programs, dual degrees, exchanges, all of those things that we're familiar with will become possible in India. It will not happen overnight, and it will not be a smooth and straightforward journey. It will need a lot of hard work and a lot of sort of understanding, but it will now start to happen. And the government is already introducing regulatory change. Even before NEP, there were steps along this way, such as the graded autonomy, the flexibility allowed to institutions of eminence. Then very, very important, and we have touched on this before, is the explosion of EdTech. This is a fast growing area of the Indian economy. It is, you know, many startups and unicorns are sort of rampaging across India. So digital infrastructure, digital content, capacity building, all of these will be opportunities for Australian EdTech companies to come in, either to deliver, set up entities, or work in partnership with Indian organizations and institutions. And we all know, you know, that EdTech is not just about putting your PowerPoint onto the web. It's a total reformation of how you approach your teaching and learning and curriculum design and pedagogy. So huge opportunities here. And then I just want to focus in on the vocational training centres. You know, this is an area that for many decades has been the Cinderella of Indian education. It requires huge investment. It requires, you know, training the trainers, infrastructure investment, new curriculum to really expand opportunities for, you know, a huge swathe of the Indian population. So lots of opportunities there for both institutions and companies to be able to work in India and contribute in this space. And then again, just to touch on the National Research Foundation, a very important step. It puts research at the heart of what's going to happen. It gives structure, it gives focus, it gives coordination, which will have much more impact than maybe, you know, India, as Lakshmi said, has many islands of excellence. And we know that top-ranking research institutions around the world have huge numbers of the Indian diaspora working there. So this is going to be a game changer for India. And it won't, none of these things will happen overnight. They're not all going to be flick a switch and on the 1st of January 2021, it will all change. It will be about a lot of hard work and a lot of development, and there will be barriers to cross. But these sort of structures that are being in place will enable implementation and change to happen. And picking up on that point, sorry?
Maybe you could have another 2 minutes, please, then we'll have questions.
We are just nearly there, not a problem. I think the other important things are the setting up of a national body for teacher training, and this goes right the way through all levels of education, and particularly, and this will bring opportunities for capacity building and capability development. So again, opportunities for Australian organisations here. And then the same with looking at the pedagogy, you know, lots and lots of opportunities for development there. So really, we have probably covered all of these things. One thing I just want to finish with, this is not just about the central government, who will be very pivotal in delivering this, but the state governments. And those state governments are already starting to adopt this policy, set up committees and groups to look at how they will implement it in their states. They will compete with each other to be more successful. They want education to drive economic development and opportunities for social mobility. So Maharashtra, for example, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu have all already established their committees. So change is starting already, and I think we will see movement happening very soon, very quickly. Lakshmi, is that the last slide, or have we got one more? No, there we go. Yeah, I hope finished on time. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Delia. Thank you, Lakshmi. That's so much to absorb. And in fact, on the last point that you mentioned, I must admit that not too long ago, I met the CEO of Study in India, who's driving quite a bit of this effort. And he was very welcoming to any inputs regarding policy and regulatory frameworks to make India a destination. And I think the future would lie in collaboration where we add value, not just by bringing students to Australia, but also coming into India and adding value here. There are some questions that we might still be able to take. Well, the first question, it again relates to two of your points on the slide, Delia, on EdTech, and the last one, it's from Rod Samimi. Thank you for the insightful presentation. To what extent the new policy allows or encourages higher education institutions to obtain academic content for either online, institute, or blended delivery from external expert providers? And Rod, if I'm not wrong, he's from Sentinel, a very innovative company from Brisbane, Queensland, that can be a genuine game changer in India. So anyone, Delia and Lakshmi, who would like to answer that?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even before the existence of NEP, there has always been mechanism for transferring of technical expertise between organizations, and a lot of research institutions have collaborated based on that, because you obviously have questions around IP and payment for technical expertise and so on. And what the NEP does is now to really kind of accelerate these kinds of collaborations that previously would have taken a lot of time and effort to kind of bring to some kind of a logical conclusion to the satisfaction of both parties involved. But hopefully with the NEP in place, we would have better frameworks, and that would enable organizations to collaborate by exchanging curriculum and being suitably compensated for contributing that technical expertise. Delia, you wanted to comment on that?
I was just going to say, we are talking to quite a number of Indian institutions who desperately need curriculum and content because they don't have the the material to move online. So they are talking to us about where they can get it, where they can either acquire it through partnership or through purchase. So even now, those opportunities are there. And India is a huge consumer, even without the NEP, of online education. And, I think more and more Indian students are signed up for short courses, for lifelong learning courses as well. So it is a huge area. And I think, if you would like we have colleagues who work in this space. So if there's anything further you want to dive into, do reach out to us and we'd be happy to help.
No, thank you, Delia. That's very encouraging, and I'm sure we may have an opportunity straight away going forward. I also want to bring to for another question that the new policy allows universities, and India is looking at top 100 global universities to come to India and make a presence here. In the light of geopolitical developments and also the different expectations that foreign universities bring to table in terms of curricula, in terms of teacher, in terms of salaries, in terms of fees, in terms of space and the way it's delivered. Any comments that you'd like to give some of the universities that might be wanting to look at it in the future perspective?
Yeah, I think that, we know that some of the private sector in India are already sort of delivering the quality of campus, and they're already attracting foreign faculty to ensure that there is, a mix of experiences for the students. So yes, it will be about investing in the sort of quality that the students outside of India expect as a standard. So I think we are going to see that sort of development in India. You will maybe know about the first UK university, for example, to be set up in China, University of Nottingham. They actually replicated the Nottingham campus in Ningbo, including the main building with the clock tower. So maybe we will see the University of Queensland's beautiful main building with your lovely purple flowers set up somewhere in India. Yes, the idea is that they will want to change what Indian higher education looks like in every aspect of experience. So I think we will see that.
And I also think that, there is no illusion in the private sector in India that to be able to attract talent and caliber and the right kind of institutional partner from overseas, an investment has to be made. If you look at some of the, if you look at the expansion in the higher education space that has happened in India in the last decade, it has largely happened driven by the private sector. And some of those private sector institutions are in a hurry to get into the top 100. So they are not going to wait for 500 years or 100 years even to, to be climbing those rankings ladder. They want to do it now. So, and that requires investment. And, the very fact that through collective philanthropy, a lot of industrialists have gotten involved in, building the next generation of Indian institutions augurs well for, future collaborations. And, who knows, there could be a joint venture, university out in the horizon already being thought of in the minds of an industrialist sat somewhere, someone who is thinking, okay, I need to build a new generation university. Because at the end of the day, at least in the private sector, there is recognition that education can also be for profit. Education could be for a social purpose, but it can also deliver profits to those who have invested. And I think accepting that would be the starting point. So we have to wait for the legislative framework anyways to come out to see how this is all going to pan out.
Thank you, Lakshmi. I'll just share one more question that's come in live. I think that's all time we'll have today for. There's an anonymous attendee who seeks to ask a question for the Australian school sector. What opportunities exist?
So, if you look at the Indian international school space, in 2012, we probably had about 300 international schools and a little over 175,000 Indian children studying in those schools. Over 7 years, by 2019, we have over 700 international schools and over close to over 400,000 Indian children studying in those. Initially, all of these international schools were built for expat communities. But if you look at the split in population now, most of these schools now host over 65 to 70% Indian children, and then obviously other nationalities. So there is a hunger for international curriculum. I don't think, maybe I would like to be corrected, but I don't think there is an Australian curriculum school per se in India. There are enough schools offering A levels and IB and the Canadian curriculum and so on and so forth. But I haven't yet come across a purely Australian curriculum school. And the very fact that so many Indian students are flocking to Australian universities for their higher education, I do think that there is merit in thinking about kind of going down that value chain and starting to catch them really young. And there will be takers amongst Indian parents. That is my view.
Yeah.
No, thank you. That's fantastic, Lakshmi. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. I would like to thank my colleague Ramya for organizing this interesting webinar. I'm sure the participants, and quite a few of them are still sticking around, found it of use. Lakshmi and Delia, once again, thank you so much. As alluding to earlier in the call, you must be both experts on the new education policy by now, and probably on the advisory boards of the Ministry of Education shown. Wish you well, wish you healthy and safe environs wherever you are. That's the best wish we can share for everyone. Thank you once again. And Tristan, my colleague from Brisbane, thank you for ensuring the IT supported us throughout. And once again, thank you on behalf of TIQ, on behalf of Study Queensland. You have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Gitesh, Ramya, and Tristan, for having us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. As you can tell, we can talk about this a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.